Well, I'm sure that many of you are going to be familiar with the old proverb, which goes something along the lines of "a fool and his money are easily parted." Well, I've got an example of that behind me and a little story to tell you. Now, this story starts, as many do, late on a Saturday night after perhaps 2 or 3 glasses of red wine too many. So this package that I've got here, it's actually been hiding in the garage for about the last 12 months because I've been too ashamed to bring it into the house and unwrap it, but here we go. Well, I'm sure that some of you will know that I quite like repairing valve radios, and I'm a particular fan of radios from the 1930s period. So when I actually bought this radio, I actually thought that I was buying, I think it was I'm trying to think back of what it was, I think it was a Cossor radio from around the 1930s period. I can't remember the model number, I will look that up. But that's what I thought I was buying, a radio from the 1930s. But as I think we'll see, there's something not quite right with this. I think the top might just dump there. This is actually quite a heavy box, this. Oh, that's a bit wibbly wobbly, isn't it? Now, at first sight, one of the most obvious things about this radio is it's in, as you can see, really quite appalling condition. The front panel is just falling off, and all the veneer is it's just breaking away, and it's lifting in various places. So, you know, the physical condition of the radio is really very poor. And one thing that this radio does have fitted is this bronze escutcheon around the frequency readout dial, and of course that's branded with the Cossor name. And I'm sure that you'll agree, as many radios did, it has that quite essential 1930s Art Deco styling. Let's just spin the radio around and have a look at its backside. So you can see that cosmetically this radio really is in quite appalling condition, but I've got to admit I really wasn't too concerned about that. The whole reason I actually bought it was because, well, 2 reasons. One, it was because it was very cheap, but the 2 more important reasons was because it was in such poor condition. Because what I was planning to do with this radio is I just wanted to do an exercise in refinishing, so I was going to re-veneer it and try to refinish this radio and just kind of do it as a bit of a learning, as a practice exercise. So that was the reason that I bought this radio. I knew that it was in poor condition to start with. But as you'll find out, it's more than just in poor condition. This radio isn't quite what it appears to be. And you can also see that we've got this quite nice Cossor radio maker's plate on it. So let's have a closer look at that. So the maker's plate says Cossor mains receiver, model number 635. This set has been specially designed for use with Cossor valves and is guaranteed only to work with Cossor valves. Do not remove back to make any adjustments without removing mains plug from the supply. And there's another label here, which I think again it's just the manufacturer's information. I think it says Cossor Limited. I don't know if it's High something, Highborough, High Wycombe. I don't know. I can't read it out. Highbury. I think it could be Highbury. So you can also see that just under the maker's plate we've got another set of instructions which again say instructions for use model 635, and it's talking about the voltage adjustment here, and then it also goes on to talk about the aerial and how to connect the aerial and the earth up, and it also gives you a line up here of the various valves that we should have inside this set. We've also got some operating instructions here, and it tells you about how to tune the radio, and it also mentions that you can operate this with a gramophone pickup as well if you so desire. So taking a close look at this radio, we've got various cutouts here in the back panel, and of course what we would be expecting is a variety of connectors and leads and things to be poking out of these cutouts, but as you can see there's nothing there. I can put my finger in and give it a little good wiggle round. So there's actually something missing from the back of this radio. In fact, let's just say there's quite a lot missing from this radio in total. I actually felt terribly smug with after buying this, and I immediately took some pictures and of the eBay ad, and I actually sent them to some of my friends. And it was actually one of my friends, Andrew Wassoffer, who runs his own channel, and I'll put a link into Andrew's channel. He he sent me a little private PM and suggesting before I got too smug that I perhaps take a close look at this radio. So let's do that now. So this is a big reveal for me as well, because I actually do know what's in here because I've seen it on the eBay pictures. I certainly didn't notice it the first time round, but my friend Andrew certainly did spot it. Oh, looks like we've got some form of homemade frame aerial. Well, that's a lump of crap, that can go. So when I originally bought this radio, there was a number of pictures with the listing. Now most of the pictures were actually just showing the outside cosmetic condition of the radio, and those are the ones that I looked at. But actually there was actually a few more pictures hiding behind those that I didn't actually spot with the original listing. But to Andrew's credit, he did actually spot them. Now the biggest outstanding thing about this, and this is what caught Andrew's eye, if you look at the back of the set here, you can see that we've got a ferrite rod. I'm afraid that they didn't have ferrite rods back in 1930s, so that immediately makes this radio wrong. So it's certainly not a Cossor 635. And also, just pulling one of the glass valves, you can immediately just tell from looking at the envelope, this is a miniature valve, and it's much more later than the big old-fashioned British valves of the 1930s period. So I did actually look this valve up. It's a frequency changer. It's an ECH 81 valve, and apparently the first date that these came out were 1953. So really, this radio, well, it's certainly not a Cossor 635 like it was claiming to be. So it looks like I've been done up like a bit of a kipper, and I've got to admit I deserve it because I really didn't take a close look at what I was buying. Oops. Well, I think the next thing that we're going to do is let's try and get the chassis out of this 635 wannabe, and maybe we'll see if we can put some power on it. Now I can see that this did at some point have a mains power lead attached, but it's been cut off for reasons unknown. I'm kind of wondering what this radio chassis originally came out of. And I'm kind of wondering if it was something like a radiogram. Now I know it sounds silly, but something about this brown covered, I don't know, it's PVC flex. Something just smells of old radiograms to me. Okay, that doesn't fit. Obviously I have to edit that out. That doesn't work either. I think maybe more grips are called for. Okay, the head of that one's just sheared off. Oh, that one's broken off as well. Wow. Well, I think it's fair to say that this radio isn't going to get treated with quite the same amount of love and respect as, you know, the original 1930s Cossor radio would have done. I'm actually thinking that this whole thing is going to push out from the front because the front is broken off this radio. Slightly unusual way to take a radio apart, I will admit. So as you can see, we've gone ahead and we've removed this radio chassis from the cabinet, and we can start to see now the full extent of the shenanigans. And I say shenanigans, there's actually a wee bit of kind of quite clever re-engineering gone on as well. So I can see here that originally we've got what I can see as looks like a valve holder. So I'm guessing that whatever this piece of equipment came out of, it had a magic eye valve. So I'm guessing that's what it is. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that would have been a magic eye valve. Unfortunately, they didn't leave us with a magic eye tube. That would have been nice to have had. But that was just flapping around inside like that. So you know, that wasn't going to do very well. One of these was going to short out on something. You can also see kind of the extent of the shenanigans. It looks like the original stringing for this radio, it must have come around here and gone round the corner or something, because I can see we've got a pulley wheel here again, which is just flapping in the breeze. So this was the aerial connection that was flapping about inside the radio, and I could actually see that this was just kind of pushed into here like this. So it says on here there's a connector, little plate that says dipole on it. But I particularly like the way, and yeah, the kind of lack of attention, kind of quite inspiring, that, isn't it, at how crap it is. And it really is quite amazing the way that they do seem to have stuffed together this dial cord arrangement. It just looks like a piece of hairy string. It's not proper dial cord, but fair play to them. They've managed just to thread it round this bottom pulley here, so it does actually tune the variable capacitor. You can see it opening and closing there. So I guess we've got to give them extra marks here for, I'm going to call this farmyard engineering. Well, you know what, I've got a terrible feeling that some of these knobs may have actually just been glued on. Ah, they have. They've glued them on, the little buggers. I think we're going to end up trying to cut these knobs off, which is it's a shame, but we can't. We need to work on it, and we can't work on it as it is. Let's try maybe a bit of wiggling might sort it out. Now that I've taken a closer look of what an actual Cossor 635 should look like, I don't think this escutcheon obviously belongs to this radio. This is probably from an earlier Cossor radio. Now I think I'm going to try and disconnect this speaker because it's quite heavy, and it's kind of getting in my way a little bit. The weight of it is starting to drag the front apart and damage things. So I think we'll lose this speaker for now. I think I'm going to need a tetanus jab after working on this thing, to be quite honest. It is quite a heavy, substantial speaker, so you know, in theory we might get some good sound reproduction out of this thing if we can actually get it powered up. Let's just cut our magic eye valve holder out of the way. I think we're going to have to get a nickname for this radio, aren't we? I think we're going to have to call it, what do you think? I think we should call it the Frankenstein radio. I think that would be a good name for this Frankenstein. Probably about the best part of this radio is this speaker. Quite a good magnet on there, very sticky. Okay, so the speaker is at least British made. It says ELAC, made in Britain. As I say, I wondered if this did come out of the original radiogram, because that's what I'm plumbing for. I think this is an old radiogram that's been reinstalled inside this radio. Now I think that's about all I can do for now. I can't get these knobs. I can't get the controls off, unfortunately, and I think that's because they've been glued on. Let's just see if I can see anything more by looking inside it. Oh, we can see some of the dreadful hunts inside there. We've still got all our waxy capacitors. Well, we've got some waxy capacitors anyway. I particularly like the way they've joined the main switch up there, which is I'm guessing that's maybe some mains wiring, and they've just put some insulation over it. So that's a nice feature. That's factory, that, isn't it? I've actually gone ahead and I've had some lubrication. I've had some stuff soaking into them for a little while, and I think that might have helped. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, that one did have something jammed on it. Okay, so we've got away. I've just broken one of the knobs here, and I think it'll probably be repairable. So I think we should be able to get this front panel off now. Come on. So I think it's probably got to about that point where I need to give everything a little bit of a clean, because it is truly quite filthy. It's got a huge collection of dead bugs and creepy crawlers inside it. and it's kind of covered in quite a liberal coating of black grease, which, well, if nothing else, it's kept the corrosion off it, hasn't it? Well, I don't know what you think. When it comes to shenanigans, I think this one is, well, it's definitely got the needle pinging over to the far end of the old shenanigans scale. I think it's in fact bending the needle on it. So just looking at this originally, the dial string I don't think it quite ran like this. I mean, maybe it did go down here, but it looks as though we've got some wheels on the side of it, so it looks as though maybe the dial cord was diverted around. And I'm not sure if this frequency indicator is the original one or not. Well, I'm not sure why, but for some reason somebody decided to cut a piece out of this dial, and originally it had this code number on, which looks as though it would have been M.12628 with the letters PL above it. So I'm just going to try and get rid of some of this grease just to make it a little bit more pleasant to work on. It really does seem, yeah, really quite fairly well coated in this black goo. Now you can just see we've got these funny shaped pieces of plastic here, and it looks as though they were designed to rub against the bottom of these shafts, because there's some rubber grommets here which looks as though they should have been designed to run in these rubber grommets, because you can see as you try to turn these, well, as you do turn these shafts, these things try to rotate. So I'm guessing if this was a radiogram, maybe these could have had light bulbs or something like that installed behind them, and maybe they were like blinkers to highlight what range it was on. Although that isn't a range switch, that's maybe a tone control. That's maybe a volume or a tone control. That's a frequency select, that just says long and short wave. So I'm guessing this one is on off, and yeah, I think that's on off and volume, although I can't make it click at the moment. What I like to do with things like this is try to do some of the really kind of nasty, dirty work first. So you can guarantee that the switches in this will need a dose of cleaning. So we may as well get some switch cleaner and stuff like that sprayed into here, because it's going to need it at some point. So we might as well get the dirty jobs out of the way first. And of course, let's face it, all these potentiometers are going to be bad, so they might as well do our best to give them a good squirt. Oh, this shaft on this one feels particularly oily and congealed, as they sometimes do. Has that got the on and off switch on it? If it has, I can't feel it. Yeah, it should have. You can see it's got the on and off switch body on it, but it doesn't seem to be clicking. This thing is absolutely stuffed with horrible hunts and waxes and I don't know, do they call them plessy ones called bumblebees? I can never remember. I'm terrible with capacitors. I'm forever asking people on the other forums what sort of capacitors this. I've got a terrible memory for these things. Let's see if that one does respond to being clicked on and off. Yeah, it does click. Well, I think I said earlier, I always make a point of giving everything a really good going over with a switch cleaner, because at the end of the day, you know that the switches on this, they're going to be dirty, aren't they? So you might as well just get it out of the way now and give them a clean, because it can help stop you chasing your tail at, you know, chasing down bad connections that we could just go ahead and just fix right now. Well, I think I've got some very interesting breaking news for you. So I said that I actually wasn't sure what this radio chassis had come out of. In fact, I had absolutely no idea. So I just posted some pictures of the chassis on the Vintage Radio Repair Forum. And lo and behold, one of the members on there, a very clever chap called Steve, came back to me. And he actually believed that this chassis has come out of a radiogram. And he says he thinks it comes from a Decca RG103. And I'll put some pictures of that up so you can have a look at it. So I have gone ahead and I've downloaded the service data for the Decca RG103, and all I can say is it's very, very close to this. It's not exactly the same, and there is a few differences that I can see. I think one of the two biggest differences that I've spotted so far is that the actual RG103. It has a push-pull output stage which consists of two EL84s. Well, this has actually just got a single EL84 valve, and it's single-ended. And one other difference that I've spotted between the RG103 radiogram chassis and this one is, well, it's this thing here. It looks like a transformer, but that's actually the HT smoothing choke, in that the RG103 doesn't have this choke on the chassis. So there is a couple of differences, but I'm sure that the service data in there is going to be, you know, quite useful and enough to get this up and running, because it must be 99% the same. Now I generally work on quite old radios. You've seen that I like my Cossor radios from the 1930s, so I think we placed this radio around 1954. So again, it was in the ballpark for what we said. I think maybe I said 1950 or 1953. So apparently these came out around 1954. And one thing that I hadn't appreciated previously is that this is a VHF set, and that's simply because I've never worked on a late VHF radio like this. Most of the stuff I play with is from the early 40s and, well, early 30s up to the 40s maybe, so I've just never had one before. But this module here is kind of like a separate bolt-on item, and this is the VHF tuner. So I'm guessing that there's actually a pulley wheel here, which I just thought was a jockey wheel for actually redirecting the dial cord. But I think looking at it, it does actually feel like if you turn it, it only goes so far and then it stops. So apart from this main tuning condenser, which probably does the long wave and the short wave, we've actually got another tuning condenser, which is I think it's inside what I'm going to call it a VHF module, which lives in here, but it hasn't been connected, so I don't know if this VHF module maybe doesn't work and it's been left out, or maybe it was just too difficult to try to restring the cord so that it would work with the VHF tuner. But certainly, given that there's a lack of stations on, you know, long wave and medium wave these days, I really think we could do with trying to get this VHF tuner working. And again, that's going to be a first for me, because I've never worked on a valve VHF tuner before, so that's going to be really interesting, I think. Well, I had planned just to plug this in and give it a try, but I've just actually had a close look at this this EL84. This is the output valve, and just looking at it, it did look a little bit different than the other valves, in that I don't know if it'll come out on camera, but it has a slightly milky appearance. And as I was just kind of having a close look to it, I noticed that the you know, the top, not the top cap, but basically where they pump the air out and seal the vacuum, the little tit on the end there, it's very sharp and it's got a crack in it. So I think this valve is what they call gassed. I think it's lost its vacuum and air has leaked in, and well, it's damaged the valve. It's not repairable. That we can't. I'm afraid we can't suck the air out and reuse it. So I'm not sure whether or not I've got a spare EL84. I'm sure I will have. It's a very common valve, this EL84. I'll have to go and have a look through the valves. Well, I don't know about you, but I think I actually want to get this powered up before we do too much work on it. I can actually see a number of these Hunts capacitors in various places, and in fact I think this Hunts capacitor, it's got that typical Hunts failure mode. It looks as though the casing is actually breaking in half. This one, the insulation seems kind of very crumbly on it, and here's the coupling capacitor, the AF coupling capacitor for our output valve. So of course we need to get that changed out, and we've got the usual nasty looking waxes, one there that's looking a bit melty. Got some Mylar ones over here, which I'm sure they should be okay, and we've also got, from what I'm guessing, is some early ceramic discs, so I would have thought they're going to be okay as well. But we've got a little bit of work to do. But I think all I am going to do at this stage is I'm just going to change out this grid coupling capacitor, and we'll try running it up gently on the variac. Of course, a little bit worried about this main smoothing capacitor. Might have a go at reforming that. I'm not exactly sure, but maybe we can just put some DC on that and see if it comes up. Oh, and I've also just spotted some very dubious mains wiring, so it looks as though this actual chassis may have fed some other chassis. Maybe it was feeding a turntable deck or something like that. So, you know, we've just got some live wiring here blowing in the lit wind. Well, I guess it's not totally live because, well, they've they've wrapped a bit of gaffer tape around it, so that was good. In fact, I think we'll just cut that off now without doing too much, so let's just get rid of that. Don't know why the people who did the modification couldn't have just cut the wire off as opposed to, you know, taping it up, because they're certainly not very satisfactory, is it? So let's got rid of that one. Okay, so let's get rid of this this capacitor here. Okay, so that's our grid coupling capacitor for the AF output valve. There's probably quite a few other capacitors that we should change. As I say, I can see that there's some in quite poor condition. So it does look like we've got the remains of a power lead here, so I think we'll just use the quick block to power this up. I'm not going to bother putting a plug on it at this stage. And of course I always think it's a really great score when we actually get something with the old red and black wiring and green earth. I've got to admit I like that much more than the modern colours. Now the other thing I think I just need to deal with is we've got the old magic eye valve that would have gone in here, but I haven't got a magic eye for it, and certainly if we rebuild the set I won't be installing a magic eye back in the case. Although maybe we could think of that. Not exactly sure how we could do it or where it would go in that old wooden case. But just for now, for powering it up, I can't have this floating around because potentially it's got some high voltage on it. It's going to short out. I think originally it was just tied on like that. Maybe we can just strap it up out of the way or wrap it up in some cardboard or something like that. But certainly we're just going to insulate it temporarily anyway. So also today I went ahead and I bought a replacement valve, an EL84. And interestingly enough, I bought that through RS Components, and it really does seem quite strange, doesn't it, that RS Components are selling valves again. I mean, the original radio spares, and interestingly enough, the valve that I bought, it was it's of Chinese origin. I don't know if they're any good. A few people have warned me against using these Chinese valves, saying that they aren't any good. But as far as I'm concerned, let's give it a go. It'll either work or it won't. But I think the interesting thing was, this valve was actually, you know, £8. It was cheaper than I could buy a valve from either off eBay or off Amazon, and that's kind of a super cheap, that, you know, considering that I got it next day from RS Components. Well, I actually say next day. I ordered it last night, I think 9 o'clock at night, but it actually arrived with me. It was in my hand by 9 o'clock the next morning, so really fascinating, really, that, isn't it? So there goes our Chinesium EL84. We'll have to see how that does, won't we? And of course we've got a loudspeaker that we need to connect back in, and for some reason the previous owner decided to connect it in with these kind of chock blocks, and I've got no idea why, because the actual speaker cable itself, it actually plugs in on a connector on the chassis, so I've got no idea why, you know, why they chose to do that. And I think what we'll do is we'll put a cable tie on here, because I'm always a little bit worried about, you know, dragging these little plastic tag strips off. If you do that, you're going to rip the wires off the voice coil, so I always think it's a good idea to try to just you know, put a bit of strain relief on these cords. Is that going to be long enough? Hopefully it will be. That will do. So what are we going to have in circuit? I think we're going to want, well, my plug socket over here is an isolated plug socket, because I've got a mains isolation transformer under the bench. So we're going to plug our wall wart energy monitoring plug in, and I can see that today my voltage is 249 volts. So I think yesterday evening it was nearly 260 volts. My voltage is very high here at home. We'll turn this over because I want to try to get a voltmeter clipped onto that capacitor so I can see if the voltage starts to come up. I'm just checking my circuit diagrams. I just want to look at the rectifier layout. Okay, so it does This radio does employ these large smoothing capacitors, but it also uses an inductor, so it's got two capacitors, C72 and C73, and they're strapped across an inductor. I wonder if we can get the tag strip on the inductor. Will that be any easier? Okay. Right, I think we're going to give it a go. Let's see if anything smokes. So we're at 50 volts and we've got no HT. Right, we've got 100 volts on at the moment and we're drawing 0.06 of an amp. I've actually got 100 volts of AC on the radio, but we've still got no DC on it at all, and that's because although we've got some lamps glowing, I've spotted the dial lamp is glowing. We haven't got enough voltage on to make the heater light up fully. So on the rectifier valve, so we're not actually getting any AC, we're not getting any DC volts at the moment. So we do need to increase our voltage a little bit more. Okay, can you see that now? Hopefully you can see that on the meter. Our DC volts is starting to come up. Now it's possible we can just leave the radio like that a little bit, just see if it does reform itself a little bit. Okay, so we're about 150 volts AC and we've got 56 volts on the DC. And I don't know if you can hear that, we're getting a little bit of action on the speaker now. I can hear something coming through. Seems to be responding to the volume control. I can hear a reasonable amount of mains hum, which could indicate that the smoothing capacitors aren't too good. Okay, so it looks like we've got it tuning.
Well, I was right all along.
Well, I've got to admit, it's not drawing a huge amount of current. But this lamp limiter is glowing brighter than I would like, so I think we need to maybe just double check those main smoothing capacitors, or maybe just change them out right away. Oops, wrong bulb. Normally I run with 100 watts in. I think this one, well, I've got no idea what that is. Is it marked on anywhere? I don't know. Maybe it's 40 watts or 60 watts. So that was giving me a false positive. So let's have another go. Obviously I get used to looking at these lamp limiters and I know how much this should glow for a typical valve radio, which is you know, basically not really very much.
Oh, it's strange.
So, Fallon,
Yeah?
what do you know about what they're planning?
Jim. Yes?
So I've just been using the age-old fault-finding method of just wiggling valves around, and seem to think that we have some FM tuning going on now, which I'm quite pleased about. So you can see that this main dial here, this does shortwave, long wave and medium wave. So, you know, that's not actually in circuit at the moment, but we've got another little pulley wheel here. If I turn that, you can hear we can tune some stuff in. So this is the FM tuning dial.
The Gold Coast, where I'm from, which is sort of the Las Vegas of Australia. And my dad, who's a doctor. I used to drink nothing but water and whiskey. Now I think those were the reasons why
And I've got to admit, that doesn't sound too bad, and I'm sure it'll all sound better when it's had some capacitors done. Welcome to Jazz Club. Nice.
Cox. Yes, a wonderful musician he is. Great shout, Jamie Cullen. What a beauty on Afro Harping by Dorothy Ashby.
So I've just gone ahead and I've connected this external FM antenna to the FM tuner. Now I think before I kept referring this as a VHF tuner. Well, I suppose it's probably more correct to call it an FM tuner, although obviously it does actually work in the VHF range. Now I don't actually know very much about these, it's fair to say, and it's kind of strange that it almost looks like the FM tuner. It looks like it's an afterthought, and I think a few people have referred to this kind of module that sits on top as a Telefunken tuner. Maybe some of you guys out there can tell me a little bit more about these, but this is the tuning wheel for it, and I've got to admit I'm quite impressed with the FM tuner. It does seem to work very well.
Began promoting the bass.
Let's just go to one end.
No. I bet your house smells amazing at the moment. Why are you baking so much then?
It's going to be our little girl's 24th birthday.
So I think that's Radio 2.
More relaxed too, writing for a film. Daniel Hope, the soloist, the BBC Symphony Orchestra, Dimitri's son Max.
I think that's maybe Radio 3.
Utamse. 2 other relatives are in hospital. One with critical injuries. Swarms of desert locusts.
I think that's our Radio 4. Some rubbish pop channel there, don't know. So all I was really going to say, it seems quite nice to have what I would call, a semi-modern FM tuner, because again, all my very old 1930s radios, they don't really pick up a lot these days because, they're kind of restricted to the kind of long wave and medium wave and short wave type things, and there's just not a lot happening on those bands. But FM signals are still transmitted readily, really quite powerfully around here, so there's plenty to pick up. So it's going to be useful that I've actually got a radio that's, it's going to be usable. The only thing I have noticed, and it's not restricted to the FM band, I would say that all the audio on this just sound just a little bit thin. I'm hesitant to use these audiophile terms. It just sounds as though it's got a little bit too much treble in it and not enough bass. Now I'm not sure how much of that has maybe got to do with this speaker here, which I'm pretty sure is not an original one. Let me just turn the power off to this and just show you this speaker. Now unfortunately I'm not sure if you can see into the bottom of this speaker cone, but it looks as though it's actually just been glued on, this little cone on top. So I don't know if this speaker's been damaged in the past, but it doesn't seem to have particularly good sound reproduction. Now of course we've still got quite a lot of work to do on this radio. We need to go ahead and do quite a lot of recapping, because certainly there's going to be lots of capacitors that need changing out, and as we change them out this sound will only improve. Well, I'm not sure of the history of this speaker, but I think it's probably a relatively modern one, and I've just gone ahead and I've actually measured the impedance of it using this audio impedance tester, and I've written it on the back here. I think it comes up as 9.9 ohms, but I'm guessing it's probably an 8 ohm speaker. Now of course I'm not certain, but back in the day a lot of amplifiers, valve amplifiers, they were designed to generally match to low impedance speakers. I mean, certainly some of the very old radios that I play with, 2 and 3 ohms is fairly typical. I think as the years went by, the impedance of the speakers did tend to go up a bit, but I'm guessing that this is maybe something from the 70s. We said earlier, it does have a brand on it. It just says ELAC, made in England. Oh yeah, maybe there is a bit of a code on here. I think it says 8RM. 265, so I wonder if that means 8 ohms. Not sure what the 265 bit refers to, but I've got a feeling this speaker's letting it down. I think I'd like to try to find something a little bit older to put back in here, because it just seems to have a rather thin, tinny sound. But maybe there's other reasons why it sounds poor. Again, maybe we've got to do some realignment and replace some of those nasty capacitors. Well, I think I'm just going to have to put this one down to experience. What have I learned? Well, perhaps it's not a good idea to go buying stuff on eBay when you've drunk 2 bottles of red wine. Probably most people knew that already. Anyway, I hope you found this little story interesting and you got a laugh out of it. But I think until next time, for today, that'll do. So until next time, as always, thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon. But until then, bye bye for now.
Bye.